The scent of lilies mingled with the bitter tang of betrayal at my mother's funeral. My sister, Clara, had flown in not to grieve, but to claim her inheritance and evict me from the only home I had left. The scent of lilies and old polish hung heavy in the air, a cloying perfume of grief that clung to the back of my throat. I stood numbly by the polished oak casket, staring at my mother's hands, folded peacefully over a book she'd never finish. They were the same hands that had bandaged my scraped knees, smoothed my hair, and, in the final months, trembled so violently I'd had to guide a spoon to her own lips. My black dress, a cheap thing I'd bought in a rush, felt scratchy and foreign against my skin. It was the only new thing I'd owned in 3 years. Everything else, my time, my money, my sanity, had been poured into the slow, draining vortex of her illness. From across the church, I could feel my sister's eyes on me. Clara wasn't watching the casket. She was watching me. I didn't need to look to know the expression on her face. It would be a carefully curated mask of sorrow for the benefit of distant relatives, but underneath, I knew there was a flinty, calculating hardness. She'd flown in from her high-rise apartment 2 days ago smelling of expensive perfume and impatience, sweeping into the house I hadn't properly cleaned in weeks, and wrinkling her nose at the faint, lingering scent of antiseptic and sickness. She'd spent more time on the phone with her florist, arguing about the exact shade of cream for the roses in the funeral arrangement, than she had spent with Mom in the last 6 months. The service was a blur of platitudes. The priest, a man who'd met Mom twice, spoke of her vibrant spirit, and I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from letting out a bitter laugh. Her spirit hadn't been vibrant for a long, long time. I was the one who had witnessed it flicker and dim, day by agonizing day. I was the one who held her while she cried in frustration when she couldn't remember my name. I was the one who changed her sheets, pureed her food, and listened to the same rambling stories a dozen times a day, pretending each time was the first. Where was Clara? She was posting filtered photos on Instagram from her vacation in Bali, captioned with, "When living my best life." She'd call once a week, a stilted 5-minute conversation where she'd talk about her promotion, her new boyfriend, or the drama with her yoga instructor before asking brightly, "So how's Mom?" as if she were inquiring about the weather. I'd try to explain the latest downturn, the new medication with its awful side effects, the terrifying night we'd spent in the ER, but her responses were always distracted. "Oh, that's tough. Well, you're doing a great job, sweetie. I'm sending you both so much positive energy. Gotta run, big meeting." And then, the click of the phone. After the service, as people milled around offering hollow condolences, she cornered me near the vestibule. Her heels clicked with sharp authority on the marble floor. She looked impeccable, her grief stylishly expressed in a tailored designer dress and a single elegant pearl earring. I probably looked like a ghost, pale and hollowed out, my hair scraped back in a messy bun. "You look exhausted," she said, her voice a low murmur that didn't quite reach her eyes. It wasn't an expression of sympathy, it was an accusation, as if my exhaustion was an inconvenience to her. "I am," I said, my voice hoarse. She straightened a non-existent crease in her dress. "Well, the hard part is over now." She glanced around, making sure no one was close enough to hear. Her perfectly glossed lips tightened into a thin line. "I've been talking to Mom's lawyer," she began, her tone shifting from fake sympathy to cold, hard business. "Just to get a handle on things. It's all very straightforward, of course." "Oh, I just stared at her, my mind a foggy landscape of sleepless nights and sorrow. I hadn't even thought about lawyers or wills. I had just been focused on getting through the day without shattering into a million pieces. "I know you probably think you're entitled to something extra," she continued, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss that was meant for me alone. "For, you know," she gestured vaguely with a perfectly manicured hand, "all this, the whole Florence Nightingale routine. My blood ran cold. The sheer audacity of her words, spoken in the house of God just feet from our mother's body, was staggering. But Mom and I had a long talk before she got really bad. We agreed on everything. She knew I was the one with the business sense, the one who could manage her legacy properly. She leaned in closer, her expensive perfume making me feel nauseous. "So just to be clear, Sarah," she whispered, her eyes like chips of ice, "you get nothing. The house, the savings, all of it. It's being managed by me. You'll be allowed to stay in the house for 30 days to get your things together. I think that's more than generous." She patted my arm, a condescending gesture that made my skin crawl. "Don't worry, I'll make sure you don't end up on the street. Maybe I can give you a small stipend until you get a job again." I couldn't speak. It was like a physical blow winding me, stealing the very air from my lungs. 3 years of my life, gone. I'd quit my job as a graphic designer, given up my apartment, and moved back into my childhood bedroom. I'd become a full-time, unpaid nurse, cook, and companion. My savings had dwindled to nothing, spent on groceries and prescription co-pays that Mom's insurance didn't cover. And now, Clara, who hadn't sacrificed a single thing, was standing here, telling me I was being evicted from my own home, from our mother's home, with nothing but a condescending offer of a stipend. She gave me a tight, triumphant smile, then turned on her heel and glided away to accept a hug from a great aunt, her performance of the grieving daughter flawless once more. I stood there, frozen, the world tilting on its axis. Was this it? Was this the final, cruel punchline to the last 3 years of my life? It seemed so. Clara always got what she wanted. She was the golden child, the successful one. I was the quiet, reliable one, the one who was always expected to pick up the pieces. And it seemed, even in death, Mom had favored her. The next few days passed in a haze. Clara was a whirlwind of brisk efficiency, sorting through Mom's belongings with a disturbing lack of sentimentality, creating piles for charity and keep. The keep pile was suspiciously small and consisted mostly of valuable jewelry and antique furniture. She spoke of selling the house as if it were a foregone conclusion, already discussing real estate agents and market values. I just drifted through the rooms, a ghost in my own life, packing my meager belongings into cardboard boxes. The fight had gone out of me. I was too broken to argue. The day of the will reading arrived. We sat in the stuffy wood-paneled office of Mr. Davies, Mom's lawyer for over 40 years. He was a kind, elderly man with watery blue eyes who looked at me with genuine pity. Clara sat beside me, tapping her foot impatiently. She'd already told me what to expect, so I was just there as a formality, a witness to her coronation. Mr. Davies cleared his throat and put on his reading glasses. "I'll get straight to it," he said, his voice soft. Eleanor was very clear in her instructions. He read through the initial bequests, a few $1,000s to a favorite charity, some specific heirlooms to cousins. It was all standard. Then he got to the main body of the will. As to the remainder of my estate, including all financial accounts, investments, and personal property, it is to be divided equally between my 2 beloved daughters, Clara and Sarah. Clara shot me a sharp, angry look. "Equally?" she whispered harshly. "That's not what she told me." Mr. Davies held up a hand. "Please, let me finish." He continued reading. However, he paused, looking over his glasses first at Clara, then at me. There was a shift in the room, a subtle change in the atmosphere. Clara leaned forward, her smug confidence beginning to crack. "There is a final codicil, added and witnessed 18 months ago, concerning the primary asset of the estate, the property at 42 Willow Creek Lane." He was talking about the house, Mom's house, my home. "The codicil overrides all previous instructions regarding the property," Mr. Davies said, his gaze settling firmly on me. Clara was practically vibrating with tension beside me. Eleanor stipulated that given the circumstances of her final years, the disposition of the family home, whether it is to be sold and the proceeds split, transferred to one party, or otherwise managed, is not to be decided by the executor. Clara let out a sharp, impatient breath. Then who decides? The bank? Mr. Davies looked at her, his expression unreadable, before turning his full attention back to me. My heart started to pound in my chest, a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. He took a slow breath, his eyes locking with mine. "No," he said, his voice clear and steady in the silent room. "According to this legally binding document, that decision is left entirely and with full authority to Sarah." The air in the small office crackled with a sudden suffocating tension. For a moment there was only the sound of a clock ticking on the wall, each tick a hammer blow against the silence. Clara's face, which had been a mask of smug certainty, contorted into a snarl of disbelief. "What?" The word was a sharp crack, like ice breaking. That's ridiculous. She wasn't competent to make a decision like that 18 months ago. She was already forgetting things. Mr. Davies didn't flinch. He slowly removed his glasses and folded them, placing them deliberately on the desk. "On the contrary, Mrs. Peterson," he said, his tone gentle but firm, his gaze never leaving Clara. "Your mother was very lucid when she made this change. She insisted on having her physician, Dr. Evans, present as a witness. There's a signed letter from him in the file, attesting to her full mental capacity and understanding of her actions on that day. It's all perfectly legal and ironclad." My mind spun, trying to catch up. Sole authority. My choice. The words echoed in the cavern of my shock. I looked from the lawyer's kind, weary face to my sister's, which was now a mottled, furious red. The carefully constructed facade of the grieving daughter had shattered, revealing the raw, grasping greed beneath. She turned on me, her eyes blazing. "You did this," she seethed, her voice a low, dangerous growl. "You poisoned her against me. You sat in that house day after day, whispering in her ear. You pathetic little leech." "Clara, that's enough," Mr. Davies said, his voice taking on a sharper edge. But she ignored him. The drive back to the house was a nightmare. I drove Mom's old sedan, the car smelling faintly of her lavender air freshener, and Clara sat in the passenger seat like a caged panther. She unleashed a torrent of abuse, a verbal assault designed to shred what little was left of my self-esteem. I was a failure who couldn't hold down a job. I was a manipulative schemer. I had taken advantage of a sick old woman. She flung every insecurity I had back in my face, weaponizing my sacrifice against me. "Do you have any idea how much that house is worth?" she demanded, gesturing wildly as we turned onto our street. "The market in this neighborhood is insane right now. We could walk away with nearly $1 million each. Is that what you're trying to steal from me? My half of $1 million. "I'm not stealing anything," I whispered, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "You're going to sit in that dusty, dying house until it rots around you because you have no ambition, no life of your own. You're just like her." That last barb hit its mark. I flinched as if struck. My mind flashed back 18 months. I remembered the exact week Mom must have called the lawyer. Clara had promised to fly in for a long weekend to give me a break. I'd counted down the days, but on the Thursday she was supposed to arrive, she'd called. "Something unavoidable has come up at work," she'd said, her voice breezy. "Super last minute, you know how it is." An hour later, I saw a photo she was tagged in on social media, her and her new boyfriend clinking champagne glasses on a balcony in Miami. Spontaneous getaway. That same weekend, Mom had a terrible fall. She was scared and in pain, but the deepest hurt was in her eyes when she'd ask, over and over, "Is Clara coming soon?" And I had to lie, making excuses for her, protecting her, just like I always had. Mom had been quiet and withdrawn for days after, but there was a new hardness in her eyes, a clarity born of disappointment. She had seen the truth. We pulled into the driveway. Clara slammed the car door and stormed inside. I followed on shaky legs, feeling like an intruder in the only home I had left. A few minutes later, she reappeared in the living room where I was standing, lost. Her tone had changed completely. The rage was gone, replaced by a syrupy, concerned sweetness that was somehow more unnerving. "Sarah, listen," she said, coming to sit beside me on the sofa, her hand on my arm. I instinctively pulled away. "I'm sorry, I'm grieving. I'm not myself. We shouldn't be fighting like this. We're all each other has now." Her eyes were wide and pleading. It was a performance, and we both knew it, but she was a master of her craft. "Let's be logical. This house is too much for you. The upkeep, the property taxes. It's a burden. The smart thing, the right thing, is to sell. We take the money, we split it 50-50, just like Mom wanted for the rest of the estate. You can buy a nice condo, travel a little, get your life back. It's a clean break, a fresh start for you." A fresh start. The words sounded tempting, like a cool drink of water after years in the desert. But then I looked around the room. I saw the worn spot on the armchair where Mom always sat. I saw the faint pencil marks on the doorframe measuring our heights as children. This wasn't just an asset. It wasn't just a burden. It was my whole life. It was the last piece of her. "I need to think," I said, the words feeling foreign in my own mouth. Clara's smile tightened at the edges. "Think about what? It's a simple business decision." "It's not a business decision to me," I said, finding a sliver of strength I didn't know I possessed. "It's my home. Mom gave me the choice, and I'm not going to be rushed. I need time." She stood up abruptly, the mask of sisterly concern falling away. "Fine," she snapped. "Take your time. But don't take too long. That market won't stay hot forever." She grabbed her purse and her car keys from the hall table. "I'm staying at the Hilton. I can't stand being in this depressing place. Call me when you've decided to stop being a sentimental idiot." The front door slammed behind her, rattling the pictures on the wall. The silence that descended was profound. It was the first time I had been truly alone in the house in 3 years, alone with my grief and with this staggering, terrifying choice. I wandered into Mom's bedroom, the scent of her still lingering on the pillows. I sat down at her little mahogany writing desk, a place she'd loved. My fingers traced the scratches and ink stains on its surface. I pulled open the top drawer, not looking for anything in particular, just wanting to feel close to her. It was filled with old stationery, dried-up pens, and paper clips, but tucked underneath it all was a thick, cream-colored envelope. My name was written on the front in my mother's familiar, spidery script, shakier than I remembered. Sarah. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside were several pages filled with her handwriting. "My dearest Sarah," it began. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone and that viper Clara is trying to take what is rightfully yours." A tear slid down my cheek, blurring the words. I read on, my mother's voice clear in my head. She wrote of her love, her gratitude, and her guilt for the burden she had become. She wrote of her clear-eyed understanding of her other daughter. She sees this house as a check to be cashed. She does not see the memories. She was never here for them. And then the final paragraph, the words that would change everything. "I have left you this choice not as a burden but as a gift. It is your security, your reward, and your power. She has had power over you your whole life. Now it is your turn. But you must know, Sarah, that the house is not the only secret I have kept. There is a safe deposit box at the downtown branch of City Central Bank. The key is taped to the underside of this very desk drawer. In that box, you will find all the documentation you need. You will find out why Clara is so desperate for the money, and you will find the leverage you need to be free of her forever." My breath hitched. My fingers fumbled beneath the drawer, my heart hammering against my ribs. And there it was, A small, cold brass key held in place by a brittle piece of yellowed tape. Leverage. A secret so big my mother felt she had to hide the proof in a bank vault. What had Clara done? What was she so desperate to conceal? The key felt heavy in my palm, like the weight of 100 unspoken truths. The next morning, the small brass key felt like a hot coal in my pocket. The house was silent, but my mind was screaming. Leverage, secrets. What could possibly be in that box? My imagination ran wild with possibilities, each more dramatic than the last. Debts? Scandals? Something criminal? Clara had always lived a life that seemed glossy and perfect from a distance, but Mom had seen the cracks. She'd seen something I hadn't. I drove downtown in a daze, Mom's letter folded carefully in my purse. The city central bank was an imposing building of granite and glass, a place I had never set foot in. It was Clara's world, a world of finance and high stakes, not mine. My hands were clammy as I approached the counter, my voice barely a whisper when I asked for access to a safe deposit box. The clerk, a prim woman with sharp glasses, looked me up and down, her expression clearly skeptical. I looked like I'd slept in my clothes, which wasn't far from the truth, but the key and the box number from Mom's letter were all that mattered. After signing a form with a shaky hand and showing my ID, I was led into the vault. The air was cool and still, smelling of metal and old money. The clerk used her key and mine, and a long, thin metal box slid out of the wall. She placed it on a table in a small private viewing room and left, closing the heavy door behind her with a soft click. For a long moment, I just stared at it. This box held the answers, the leverage, the key to my freedom. My heart hammered against my ribs as I lifted the lid. Inside, there wasn't gold or jewelry. There was just a thick stack of papers held together with a rubber band. On top was another note from Mom, shorter this time. "Sarah, I'm so sorry you have to learn about this. Be strong. This is your life now. Love, Mom." I slipped the rubber band off and started to read. The first few pages were bank statements. Not Mom's, but from an account under a corporate name I didn't recognize. Golden Finch Enterprises. But the statements were addressed to Clara. I scanned the columns of figures, deposits and withdrawals. The deposits were huge, tens of thousands of dollars at a time. The withdrawals were just as large, going to accounts with names that sounded like luxury car dealerships, high-end jewelers, and what looked like a property management company in the Cayman Islands. Then I found the other documents. They were legal papers, incorporation documents for Golden Finch Enterprises. The sole director and owner was listed as Clara Peterson. Attached to these were loan agreements, personal loans taken out by my mother. The first one was for $50,000, taken out almost 4 years ago, just before Mom's illness took a serious turn. The recipient of the funds? Golden Finch Enterprises. My blood ran cold. I kept digging through the pile. There was another loan agreement for $75,000 a year later, and another for $100,000 dated just 2 weeks after Clara's spontaneous getaway to Miami, the weekend Mom had her fall. In total, my mother had taken out personal loans against the equity of her house, totaling over $200,000, and every single cent had been funneled directly to Clara's shell corporation. Tucked at the very bottom of the stack was a series of printed emails. They were between Clara and a man named Marcus. The tone was intimate, filled with plans for the future. They talked about their project, their seed money, and how they were going to be millionaires. One email from Clara stood out, and the words seemed to burn themselves into my retina. "She's getting worse, Em. Her memory is shot. She barely questioned the last set of papers. It's sad, but it's the only way. Once we get this last bit of capital, the condo development deal will be secure. We just have to keep her sweet for a little longer." The breath left my body in a ragged gasp. It wasn't just that Clara had taken money from Mom. She had systematically drained her, using her declining health as a cover. She had Mom sign loan documents, calling them insurance papers or tax forms. She had been financially abusing our sick mother while I was in the next room, changing her sheets and pureeing her food. The business sense she'd bragged about, the legacy she was managing, it was all a lie. She'd put a massive lien on the very house she was now so desperate to sell. Selling the house wasn't just about getting her inheritance. It was about paying back the loans before the bank foreclosed, before her entire fraud was exposed. I sat there in the cold, sterile viewing room, shaking with a rage so profound it felt like it could split me in two. The sisterly betrayal was a deep, searing wound, but the violation of my mother, that was unforgivable. All my sacrifice, all my care, had been a cover for Clara's monstrous greed. I had been her unwitting accomplice, the live-in nurse who kept Mom comfortable while Clara bled her dry. The 30 days she had generously given me to leave the house suddenly made sense. She needed to sell it quickly, settle the debt, and erase her tracks. I carefully packed everything back into the box, my movements stiff and robotic. I walked out of the bank and into the blinding sunlight, my mind a maelstrom of fury and pain. I knew what I had to do. The power Mom had given me wasn't just a choice about a piece of property. It was the power to expose the truth. I called Clara. "I've made a decision about the house," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Finally!" Her relief was palpable. "I knew you'd see sense. I'll call the agent right now. We can have it on the market by Monday." "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it landed with the force of a dropped stone. "We need to meet at the house in an hour. And Clara?" I paused, letting the silence stretch. "Come alone." She arrived exactly 1 hour later, sweeping into the house with a triumphant smile on her face, a portfolio of real estate brochures tucked under her arm. "Okay, I've got comps for the neighborhood, and I think if we price it aggressively—" "Sit down, Clara," I said. I was sitting in Mom's armchair, the stack of papers from the safe deposit box on the coffee table in front of me. My calmness seemed to unnerve her. Her smile faltered. "What is all this?" she asked, gesturing at the pile of documents. "This," I said, picking up the top bank statement, "is Golden Finch Enterprises." The color drained from her face. It was instantaneous and absolute. She stared at the papers, then at me, her eyes wide with panic. She knew exactly what I had. Where did you get that?" she stammered. "Mom left me a letter," I said, my voice cold as steel. "And a key. She knew what you were doing. She knew you were taking out loans in her name, making her sign papers she didn't understand. $225,000, Clara. That's how much you stole from her while I was holding her hand." She sank onto the sofa opposite me, all the fight gone out of her. She looked small and pathetic. "You don't understand," she whispered. "It was an investment, a property deal. I was going to pay it all back with interest. I needed capital." "You needed capital? So you preyed on a sick, confused old woman?" I shot back, my voice rising with the fury I had been suppressing. "Our mother! Did you feel powerful when you had her sign her home away? Did you feel smart when you lied to her face?" Tears started streaming down her face, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of self-pity, of being caught. "It all went wrong," she sobbed. "Marcus, he left. The deal fell through. The money, it's gone, Sarah. It's all gone." So that was it. The high-flying boyfriend, the condo development, all of it had blown up in her face, leaving her with a massive debt secured against a house that wasn't even hers. I looked at her, a broken, weeping mess, and I felt nothing. No pity, no sisterly affection, just a cold, hard resolve. "You're right," I said. "The money is gone, and the bank will want its $225,000 back. With interest." She looked up at me, her face streaked with mascara. "We have to sell the house," she pleaded, her voice desperate. "It's the only way. We sell, we pay off the debt, and we can split whatever is left. Please, Sarah. If you don't, they'll foreclose. We'll both lose everything." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the rose bushes Mom had so lovingly tended. For years, I had been the one to smooth things over, to make sacrifices, to keep the peace. I had let Clara walk all over me, and worse, I had let her walk all over our mother. But not anymore. I turned back to face her. She was watching me, her breath held, waiting for my judgment. The choice Mom had given me was clear now. It wasn't about the house, not really. It was about justice. "There's another way," I said slowly, an idea taking shape in my mind, cold and sharp and perfect. A way for the debt to be paid, a way for me to keep the house, and a way for you to finally pay for what you've done. Clara stared at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and confusion. "What are you talking about?" I picked up the loan agreements, the proof of her fraud, the documents that could send her to prison. "I have a proposal for you, Clara," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "It's not a negotiation, it's a list of my demands, and you will agree to every single one of them. Or I will walk out of this house right now, drive straight to the district attorney's office, and you will never see the light of day as a free woman again." Clara's face went ashen. The tears stopped as if a faucet had been shut off, replaced by a raw, primal fear. She looked at the papers in my hand, then at my face, searching for any sign of a bluff. She found none. The meek, compliant little sister she had known her whole life was gone, replaced by a stranger with eyes as hard as granite. I wasn't just grieving anymore. I was forged in it, and the heat of my rage had burned away all the softness. What do you want?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I laid it out for her, my voice low and steady, each word a carefully placed stone in the foundation of my new life. "First," I began, "you will sign a quitclaim deed, relinquishing all legal right and title to this house. It will be mine, and mine alone, free and clear of any claim from you, forever. My lawyer will draw up the papers tomorrow." She flinched, but didn't speak. She knew she had no choice. "Second," I continued, my gaze unwavering, "the $225,000 debt you fraudulently attached to this property is now your debt, and yours alone. You will be responsible for every single cent. You will refinance it in your name, you will make every payment, and you will not miss a single one. I want a legally binding agreement drawn up to that effect. If you default, the agreement will state that I have the right to pursue full legal and criminal charges against you for the original fraud." She started to protest, her mouth opening to object. "But I can't. I don't have the income to qualify for a loan that big. The money's gone." "That sounds like a you problem, Clara," I said, my voice utterly devoid of sympathy. "You were so proud of your business sense. Figure it out. Sell your designer clothes. Sell your luxury car. Get a second job. Get a third. I don't care how you do it. But you will not let this debt tarnish our mother's name or threaten her home for one more second." I let that sink in before delivering the third and final demand. "And finally," I said, leaning forward slightly, "you are going to pay me." Her head snapped up, a flicker of her old, indignant self flashing in her eyes. "Pay you? For what? After all this, you want more money?" "I want my life back," I stated, the words raw and true. "For 3 years, I was this family's full-time, unpaid caregiver. I quit my job. I drained my savings. I put my entire life on hold. While you were taking vacations and playing entrepreneur with our mother's money, I was here. So yes, you are going to pay me. You are going to pay me a salary for every single one of those 3 years. We'll calculate it based on the average salary for a full-time home health aide, plus back pay for my lost income as a graphic designer, with interest. My lawyer will work out the exact figure, but I imagine it will be substantial." She stared at me, aghast. The sheer scale of what I was demanding was finally dawning on her. I wasn't just asking for the house. I was saddling her with a mountain of debt and indenturing her to me for the foreseeable future. I was stripping her of everything she valued, her money, her image, her freedom. "This is insane, Sarah," she choked out. "You're destroying my life." "No," I corrected her, my voice dangerously quiet. "You destroyed your own life when you decided to treat our mother like your personal ATM. You destroyed it when you left me to handle everything while you swan dived into a fantasy world funded by her life savings. I'm just handing you the bill." I stood up, gathering the papers from the table. "You have 24 hours to agree to my terms. Have your lawyer contact mine. Here's his card." I slid Mr. Davies' business card across the table. "If I don't hear from your legal representation by noon tomorrow, I will take that as a no, and I will proceed directly to the police. Are we clear?" She could only nod, her body slumped in defeat. The golden child was tarnished beyond recognition. I walked out of the room without another word, leaving her to drown in the ruins of the life she had built on lies. The next morning, as expected, my lawyer received a call. Clara had agreed to everything. The week that followed was a blur of legal activity. We met in a sterile conference room to sign the documents. Clara wouldn't look at me. She was gaunt, with dark circles under her eyes. Her expensive clothes hung off her frame, and she moved with the slow, defeated shuffle of someone who had lost everything. She signed the quit-claim deed, the debt assumption agreement, and the personal repayment contract without a word. Her signature, a spidery, hesitant scrawl. When it was all done, she left without a word. The moment the door closed behind her, a wave of something utterly overwhelming washed over me. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't joy. It was just quiet. The roaring fire of my anger had finally burned itself out, leaving behind an empty, hollow space. I had won. I had the house, I had my financial security, and I had justice for my mother. But I was completely and utterly alone. My mother was gone. The sister I had once known, or thought I'd known, was gone too, replaced by a monster of her own making. The weight of it all settled on me, and for the first time since the funeral, I truly wept, not for my mother's death, but for the death of my family. In the months that followed, I tried to build a new life from the wreckage. The house felt huge and empty, haunted by memories. I started by clearing out Clara's things, packing away the remnants of her childhood into boxes that I stored in the attic. Then I started on Mom's room. It was the hardest part. Every dress in her closet, every book on her nightstand was a fresh stab of grief. But slowly, painstakingly, I began to reclaim the space. I painted the walls a warm, sunny yellow. I bought a new couch. I started a small vegetable garden in the backyard, planting the tomatoes and basil Mom had always loved. The first of Clara's repayment checks arrived a month later. It was for a painfully large sum, and it came in a plain white envelope with no return address. They continued to arrive like clockwork on the first of every month. I never heard from her directly. There were no calls, no emails, no texts. She had simply vanished from my life, becoming nothing more than a name on a monthly bank transfer. I heard through a distant cousin that she had sold her condo, moved into a tiny rental apartment across town, and was working 2 jobs, one in marketing and another waiting tables at night. The thought gave me a grim, detached sense of satisfaction. Justice was being served, one grueling shift at a time. Life settled into a new, quiet rhythm. I started doing freelance graphic design work again, building up a small client base. The house began to feel less like a mausoleum and more like a home, my home. But there was a piece of the puzzle still missing, a question that nagged at the back of my mind. What about Marcus? The boyfriend, the business partner, the man who had vanished with my mother's money. Clara was paying her price, but he had walked away scot-free. The injustice of it festered. One rainy Tuesday, fueled by a mixture of boredom and restlessness, I did something I hadn't done in years. I logged into my old Facebook account. I had deactivated it when Mom got sick, unable to stomach the endless stream of happy, normal lives. After a few minutes of scrolling through baby pictures and vacation announcements from people I barely knew, I typed Marcus's name into the search bar. His profile was public. My breath caught in my throat. His profile picture was a professional headshot, him in a sharp suit, smiling a predatory, confident smile. And right next to it was his current relationship status. It wasn't single. It wasn't in a relationship. It was married. He had gotten married just 2 months ago. I clicked on his wife's profile. Her name was Amelia. She was beautiful with a kind, open face. Their pictures were a sickeningly sweet collage of happiness. A lavish wedding, a honeymoon in Italy, a new puppy. And then I saw the post that made my entire body go cold. It was a photo of them, beaming, standing in front of a newly constructed house, a sold sign in the front yard. Amelia's caption read, "We did it. After all of Marcus's hard work, our dream home is finally a reality. So proud of my amazing husband for closing the biggest deal of his career. Can't wait to start our lives here. Blessed new beginnings." I stared at the screen, a slow, icy dread creeping up my spine. The house in the picture? It was a brand new condo, part of a large, modern development. I zoomed in on the photo, my heart pounding. In the background, partially obscured by a tree, was a sign for the development. The name of the complex was Golden Finch Estates. The name on the screen seemed to burn. Golden Finch Estates. It couldn't be a coincidence. The shell corporation Clara had used to funnel Mom's money was Golden Finch Enterprises. It was the same name. The deal hadn't fallen through. Marcus hadn't run off with the money and left Clara high and dry. He had just run off with the money and left her. He had taken her name, her concept, and our mother's money and built his dream life on top of it, marrying another woman and cutting Clara out completely. The story she'd sobbed to me, that the deal had collapsed and the money was gone, was a lie, or at best, a half-truth. The deal had gone through, but she had been double-crossed. A new kind of anger, sharper and more focused than anything I'd felt before, surged through me. Clara was a monster, but she was a monster of Marcus's making, at least partially. He was the architect of this whole scheme. He had manipulated her, used her desperation and greed, and then discarded her when she was no longer useful, leaving her to face the consequences alone. She was paying for her crimes, working 2 jobs to pay back a debt he had helped create, while he was living in a luxury condo paid for with my mother's stolen money. The injustice was staggering. It wasn't enough for Clara to pay. He had to pay too. For the next 2 days, I fell down a rabbit hole of online investigation. I was no detective, but grief and rage are powerful motivators. I pieced together Marcus's digital footprint. His LinkedIn profile boasted of his success as a boutique property developer. He'd founded a new company, MCore Developments, about a year ago. A quick search of public business records showed he was the sole owner. I found the website for Golden Finch Estates. It was glossy and professional, featuring photos of sparkling pools and state-of-the-art gyms. The About the Developer page featured that same smarmy photo of Marcus, with a biography that painted him as a visionary real estate prodigy. There was no mention of Golden Finch Enterprises or Clara Peterson. He had completely erased her from the history of their project. The most damning discovery came from digging into the county's property records. I found the original deeds for the land where the condos were built. The land had been purchased a little over 2 years ago. And the buyer? Not MCore Developments. Not Marcus. The buyer of record was Golden Finch Enterprises. He had used Clara's shell company, funded by my mother's money, to buy the land. Then, he must have dissolved the company, transferred the assets to his new one, and built the complex, effectively laundering the stolen money into a legitimate, multi-million-dollar business. I had the proof, or at least the beginning of it. I printed out everything. The property records, the corporate filings for both companies, screenshots of his social media, the emails between him and Clara that Mom had saved. I laid it all out on the dining room table, a mosaic of his deceit. It was a clear line from my mother's bank account to his brand new life. But what could I do with it? Going to the police was still an option, but it was complicated. It would mean exposing Clara's role, potentially undoing the legal agreements we had in place. My carefully constructed peace would be shattered. I needed a different kind of leverage. I needed to face him. His wife, Amelia, was the key. Her social media profile painted a picture of a sweet, slightly naive woman who was head over heels in love with her wonderful, successful husband. She posted constantly, sharing every detail of their idyllic life. It was through her posts that I found my opening. She announced they were hosting a housewarming party that Saturday, an open house for all our friends and family to celebrate our new home. She even posted a cute animated invitation with the address and time. It was a catastrophic lapse in judgment, a massive security risk, but for me, it was a golden ticket. The idea that formed in my mind was terrifying. It was bold and reckless, and went against every quiet, cautious instinct I had. But the thought of Marcus living his perfect life, unpunished, was something I could not stomach. He had hurt my family. He had built his happiness on my mother's suffering. I was going to tear it all down. On Saturday evening, I dressed carefully, not in a cheap, scratchy black dress, but in a stylish, dark blue sheath I'd owned from my old life, one I hadn't worn in years. I did my hair and makeup, transforming myself from the hollowed-out caregiver into someone who looked like she belonged. I looked confident. I looked successful. I looked like I could be a potential buyer for a luxury condo. I drove to Golden Finch Estates. It was even more opulent in person than it was online. Manicured lawns, a grand entrance with a fountain, a concierge in the lobby. I told the concierge I was here for the party at Marcus and Amelia Thorne's residence. He smiled and waved me through. As I walked down the plushly carpeted hallway, my heart hammered in my chest. This was insane. What was I even going to do? Confront him in front of his wife and friends? When I reached the apartment, the door was ajar, music and laughter spilling out into the hall. I took a deep breath and pushed it open. The condo was beautiful, all floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist decor. A crowd of well-dressed people mingled, holding glasses of champagne, and there he was, across the room, holding court. It was Marcus. He looked just like his pictures, charming and handsome, his arm draped possessively around Amelia's shoulders. He was laughing, completely at ease in his kingdom built on theft. No one noticed me slip in. I moved to the edge of the room, my palms sweating, my mind racing. I needed to get him alone. I saw him hand his champagne flute to Amelia and head towards a hallway, likely looking for the bathroom. This was my chance. I followed him, my heels silent on the polished hardwood floors. I caught up to him in the hall just outside a closed door. "Marcus," I said. He turned, a polite, dismissive smile on his face, ready to greet another guest. But the smile vanished as he looked at me. He didn't know who I was, but he could see I wasn't one of his friends. There was something in my eyes that made him wary. "Do I know you?" he asked, his tone shifting from charming host to cautious businessman. "No," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "But you knew Clara Peterson." His face went rigid. It was a flicker, a split-second loss of control, but I saw it. The recognition. The fear. "I don't know who you're talking about," he said, his voice dropping to a low, threatening tone. He started to turn away. "I have a file," I said quickly, stopping him in his tracks. "Property deeds for this land, bought by a company called Golden Finch Enterprises. Bank statements showing the source of the funds, emails. I have everything, Marcus." He turned back to face me fully, his eyes cold and hard. We were standing in the quiet hallway, the sounds of his party a world away. "What do you want?" he hissed. "I want what you took," I said. $225,000, plus interest, plus damages." He let out a short, incredulous laugh. "You're crazy. You can't prove a thing." "Can I?" I said, reaching into my purse. My hand closed around the small, heavy object I had brought with me. "Maybe you're right. Maybe the paperwork isn't enough for a court, but I don't think Amelia is a court of law. I wonder what she'd think of all this." "Your blushing bride." I smiled, a cold, sharp thing. "Maybe I should just go and ask her." I took a step back towards the living room. His hand shot out and grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my flesh. The charming facade was gone, replaced by pure, cornered animal menace. "You stay away from my wife," he snarled, his face inches from mine. "Then you'll pay me," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Everything you owe." He stared at me, his mind clearly working, calculating the odds, the risks. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken threats. Finally, a slow, venomous smile spread across his face. "You've got guts. I'll give you that," he said, his grip on my arm tightening. "But you've made a big mistake coming here. You think you have me trapped?" He leaned in closer, his voice a poisonous whisper. "You have no idea what you've just walked into. My wife, Amelia, her father is the district attorney for this city." The air in the hallway turned to ice. His words hit me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the breath from my lungs and the strength from my knees. The district attorney's daughter, the one man in the entire city with the power to make or break a criminal case, to bury evidence, to destroy a person's life with the full, crushing weight of the law, was Marcus's father-in-law. My perfect ironclad case, my righteous leverage, had just evaporated. I had walked into the lion's den holding a stake, thinking I was the hunter. Marcus saw the shock and fear on my face, and his venomous smile widened. He had me. He knew it. His grip on my arm loosened, replaced by a condescending pat. "You see, you thought you were holding all the cards," he murmured, his voice laced with triumphant cruelty. "But this isn't some game you can win. You bring this nonsense to light, you'll be painted as a delusional, grieving woman trying to extort a successful businessman. My father-in-law will have his best people making sure of that. Your little file of papers will disappear into an evidence locker and never see the light of day. And you'll be lucky to escape with a harassment charge." He straightened his tie, the picture of calm, untouchable power. "So here's what's going to happen. You are going to turn around, walk out of my home, and forget any of this ever happened. Forget my name. Forget Clara's name. You're going to be content with whatever scraps your sister is throwing you and be grateful I don't decide to make your life a living hell just for fun. Am I clear?" My mind was a whirlwind of panic. He was right. It was my word, a collection of circumstantial documents against the son-in-law of the most powerful lawyer in the city. I was nothing, a freelance graphic designer with a dead mother and a disgraced sister. Who would believe me? I had made a terrible, terrible mistake. My only option was to retreat, to run. But as I looked at his smug, victorious face, something inside me snapped. It was the same stubborn spark that had allowed me to get through 3 years of caregiving, the same spark that had ignited into a fire of rage when I read my mother's letter. He was going to get away with it. After everything, after destroying Clara's life, after stealing from my dying mother, he was going to walk away without a single consequence, protected by a shield of power and influence he hadn't even earned. The sheer, naked injustice of it was more than I could bear. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it hung in the air between us, heavy and defiant. His smile faltered. "What did you just say?" "I said no," I repeated, my voice growing stronger. A reckless, desperate plan was forming in my mind, a wild gamble with no guarantee of success, but it was better than slinking away in defeat. "You're right, Marcus. I can't beat you in a courtroom. Your father-in-law will make sure of that. But you've forgotten one thing." I pulled my arm free from his grasp. "You built your entire life on a lie. This condo, your company, your marriage. It's all a house of cards, and I don't need a courtroom to pull one out from the bottom." Before he could react, I turned and walked back into the living room. The party was in full swing, a symphony of clinking glasses and cheerful chatter. I saw Amelia near the massive windows, talking to a group of friends, her face glowing with happiness. My heart pounded against my ribs. This was it. There was no turning back. I walked directly towards her, my path intersecting with a waiter carrying a tray of champagne. In a move that felt both clumsy and deliberate, I stumbled, bumping into him hard. The tray tilted, and 2 full glasses of champagne cascaded down the front of my blue dress. "Oh my God!" Amelia cried, rushing over. "Are you okay? I am so sorry." "It's fine, really," I said, dabbing at the spreading stain with a cocktail napkin. "It's my own fault. I wasn't looking where I was going." Marcus appeared at my side, his face a thunderous mask of fury, but he was trapped. In front of his wife and guests, he had to play the part of the concerned host. "Let's get you cleaned up," Amelia said, taking my arm with genuine concern. "Come on, you can use our bathroom." She led me away from the party, back down the same hallway where Marcus had threatened me moments before. He followed close behind, his eyes boring into my back. This was my chance. I was inside the master suite. Amelia bustled around, grabbing a towel. "You can use my husband's robe if you need to take the dress off to dry it," she offered. "Thank you, you're so kind," I said, my voice full of false gratitude. As she turned to the closet, I glanced at Marcus, who was standing in the doorway, blocking any escape, his expression murderous. I needed to get rid of him. "You know," I said to Amelia, my voice light and conversational, "your husband is so charming. I was just telling him in the hall how much I admire his work. Golden Finch Estates is such a clever name. It sounds so established. Did he come up with it himself?" Amelia beamed. "Oh, he comes up with everything himself. He's a genius. He built this whole company from the ground up with nothing but his own grit and determination." I saw Marcus flinch. The lie, spoken so innocently by his adoring wife, was a dagger. "I'm so sorry to be a bother," I said, turning my full attention to Amelia. "My dress is probably ruined. Would it be too much to ask for a glass of water?" "Of course not," she said immediately. "Marcus, darling, be a dear and get our guest a glass of water, please." He was stuck. He shot me a look that promised murder, but he couldn't refuse his wife in front of a guest. He turned and left the room. The moment he was gone, I acted. "Amelia," I said, my voice dropping, becoming serious and urgent. "I'm so sorry to do this at your party, but I'm not here by accident. Your husband, he isn't the man you think he is." Her smile faded, replaced by confusion. I don't understand." "My name is Sarah Jensen," I said, speaking quickly, my words tumbling over each other. "My sister's name is Clara Peterson. A few years ago, she and your husband were partners. They started a company called Golden Finch Enterprises to buy the land this building is on. The money they used, it was stolen from my mother while she was dying." She stared at me, her eyes wide with disbelief and dawning horror. That's not possible. Marcus would never—" "Wouldn't he?" I pressed, my voice softening with a sympathy I genuinely felt for this woman whose world was about to be shattered. "He didn't just steal the money, Amelia. He stole the company. He took everything, left my sister with hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraudulent debt, and built this life for you with the proceeds. He double-crossed his partner and left her to rot." I paused, letting the words sink in. If he could do that to a business partner, the woman he was once involved with, what makes you think he wouldn't do the same to you? Just then, Marcus reappeared in the doorway, a glass of water in his hand. He saw the look on Amelia's face, saw her looking from me to him, the first terrible seeds of doubt planted in her eyes. He stopped dead. The glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. The sound echoed in the sudden silence of the bedroom, and in that moment, I knew I had him. I hadn't needed a courtroom after all. I had found a jury of one. Amelia turned to her husband, her voice a fragile whisper. "Marcus, is any of this true?" Marcus stared at the shattered glass on the floor, then at his wife's pale, questioning face. For a split second, I saw pure, unadulterated panic in his eyes, the kind of panic that comes when the walls of a carefully constructed lie begin to crumble. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, his mind scrambling for a plausible denial, an excuse, anything to stop the poison I had just poured into his perfect life. "Amelia, darling, this woman is crazy," he finally managed, his voice a little too loud, a little too forced. He took a step towards her, his hands outstretched. "She's clearly unstable. She's probably some disgruntled ex-employee or someone Clara hired to cause trouble. You can't listen to her." But the seed of doubt had taken root. Amelia flinched away from his touch, her eyes darting between us. "Who is Clara?" she asked, her voice trembling. The name, which he had so desperately tried to erase, was now hanging in the air of his beautiful new home. "She's nobody!" Marcus snapped, his composure cracking. He turned his glare on me. "Get out of my house! Now! Before I call security and have you thrown out!" "Go ahead," I said calmly, not taking my eyes off Amelia. "Call them. Call your father-in-law, too. Let's get everyone in here and have a nice long talk about Golden Finch Enterprises. I brought my paperwork. It's right here in my purse." I made a move to open my handbag. It was a bluff. The real papers were locked safely at home, but it was enough. "Amelia, don't listen to this insanity," Marcus pleaded, his voice shifting to a desperate, placating tone. "This is a shakedown. She wants money, that's all." "It's not about the money anymore, Marcus," I said, my voice cold and clear. "It's about the truth." I looked at Amelia, my expression softening. "He lied to you. He built this life on a foundation of theft and betrayal. Ask him. Ask him to look you in the eye and tell you he's never heard of Clara Peterson or Golden Finch Enterprises." The silence in the room was absolute. The distant sound of the party outside the door seemed to be coming from another planet. Amelia stood frozen between us, the two conflicting narratives warring in her mind. Her husband, the self-made genius she adored, and this strange, intense woman with a story so horrific it had to be either a lie or the devastating truth. "Marcus," she whispered, her gaze fixed on his face, searching for the man she thought she knew. Just tell me she's lying." He looked at his wife, at her pleading, tear-filled eyes. He saw his entire world, his marriage, his reputation, his connection to the district attorney hanging by a single thread. And in that moment, he made his choice. He chose the lie. "Of course she's lying, baby," he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "I have never, ever heard of this Clara person. Golden Finch? It sounds like a Chinese restaurant. This woman is sick. She needs help." It was a masterful performance. He was so convincing, so earnest, that for a horrifying second, I thought it might work. I saw Amelia's expression waver, wanting so desperately to believe him, but I had one more card to play, the one thing my mother's evidence box had contained that wasn't a legal document. "He's a very good liar," I said softly to Amelia. "He had a lot of practice on my sister." I slowly pulled my phone from my purse. My hands were shaking, but my resolve was firm. I navigated to my photo gallery and found the picture I was looking for. A picture from the printed-out social media files Mom had saved. A picture Clara had posted almost 3 years ago, long before she'd scrubbed her accounts. It was from a formal event, a charity gala of some kind. In it, a younger, happier Clara was beaming at the camera, her arm linked with a handsome man in a tuxedo. A man who was looking at her with an expression of pure adoration. The man was Marcus. I held the phone out to Amelia. "This was taken a few months before he met you," I said quietly. before he decided my sister and her access to our mother's money were more useful to him than her companionship. Amelia took the phone. Her eyes widened as she stared at the image. It was undeniable. It was him. Younger, but unmistakably Marcus, his arm linked intimately with the woman he claimed he'd never heard of. The lie he had just told, so bold and so absolute, crumbled into dust. She looked up from the phone, her face a mask of utter devastation. The love and adoration in her eyes were gone, replaced by the sickening, hollow look of betrayal. She looked at her husband, truly seeing him for the first time. The charming entrepreneur, the loving partner, it was all an act. Underneath, there was just a cold, calculating stranger. You lied to me," she whispered, the words catching in her throat. "You just stood there and you lied right to my face." "Amelia, wait, I can explain," Marcus began, taking a step toward her, his voice frantic. "Don't touch me," she shrieked, recoiling as if he were a snake. She shoved the phone back into my hand and stumbled away from him, towards the other side of the room, her hand covering her mouth as a sob escaped her. The party noise from the living room suddenly seemed to intrude. A burst of laughter drifted through the door. The sound was obscene, a relic from a life that had just ceased to exist for Amelia. I had done it. I had destroyed him. Not in a courtroom, but in the heart of his own home, using his own lies against him. I looked at Marcus. He was no longer the powerful, untouchable man from the hallway. He looked pathetic, his face pale and slack with shock, watching the wreckage of his marriage unfold before his eyes. He had lost. My work was done. There was nothing more for me here. I turned and walked quietly out of the bedroom, leaving the two of them alone in the ruins. I slipped through the party, no one noticing my departure any more than they had noticed my arrival. As I walked out the front door of the condo and into the sterile, quiet hallway, I heard the first sounds of shouting from the bedroom, followed by the heart-wrenching sound of Amelia's weeping. The drive home was surreal. The adrenaline slowly faded, leaving me feeling empty and exhausted. I had avenged my mother. I had brought Marcus to justice in the only way I could, but it was a hollow victory, tainted by the collateral damage I had inflicted on a woman who had shown me nothing but kindness. The next few days were silent. I heard nothing. I scanned the news, expecting to see some mention of a high society divorce, but there was nothing. I wondered if he had managed to talk his way out of it, to smooth things over with his powerful father-in-law's help. The thought that I had gone through all of that for nothing, that his web of influence had saved him yet again, began to gnaw at me. Then, a week after the party, a long, sleek black car pulled up in front of my house. It was the kind of car that costs more than I made in 5 years. I watched from the living room window as a man in a sharp, tailored suit got out of the passenger side. He was older, in his 60s, with a mane of silver hair and a face that radiated authority and quiet menace. He walked up my path and rang the doorbell. My blood ran cold. I knew with absolute certainty who he was. It was Amelia's father, the district attorney. He hadn't sent the police. He hadn't sent his lawyers. He had come himself. My hand hovered over the doorknob, my entire body frozen in a state of high alert. This was the endgame, Marcus's checkmate. The district attorney was on my doorstep, and I was about to find out what it truly meant to challenge a powerful man. I took a deep, steadying breath, opened the door, and braced myself for the storm. He stood on my porch, an imposing figure framed by my mother's climbing roses. His eyes, a piercing blue, assessed me with a cool, dispassionate gaze. There was no anger in his expression, just a kind of weary gravity. He looked less like a prosecutor and more like a surgeon about to deliver a grim diagnosis. "Ms. Jensen?" he asked, his voice a low, resonant baritone that commanded attention without needing to be raised. "Yes," I said, my own voice surprisingly steady. "My name is Robert Thorne. May I come in for a moment?" It wasn't really a question. I stepped back, holding the door open, and he walked past me into the living room. He didn't sit down. He stood in the center of the room, his hands clasped behind his back, surveying the space. He looked at the worn armchair where my mother used to sit, the photos on the mantel, the faint pencil marks on the doorframe. He was taking the measure of the life that his son-in-law had helped to upend. "My daughter came to see me a few days ago," he began, his back still to me. "She was distraught. She told me a very disturbing story." He turned to face me, his eyes locking onto mine. "A story about my son-in-law, about a woman named Clara Peterson, and about you." I remained silent, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I wouldn't give him anything until I knew where this was going. "For the past week," he continued, "I've had my best investigators looking into your claims, not as the district attorney, but as a father. They have been discreet. They have been thorough. They have looked into Golden Finch Enterprises, M-Core Developments, and the series of loans taken out against this property." He paused, and his expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Everything you told my daughter, Ms. Jensen, appears to be the unvarnished truth." A wave of relief so profound it almost buckled my knees, washed over me. He knew. He had the resources to find the truth, and he had used them. He believed me. "Marcus has confessed to everything," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "He admitted to coercing your sister, to defrauding your mother, to hiding the assets and cutting Clara out of the deal. He tried to frame it as a business dispute that got out of hand, but the facts are ugly." He walked over to the window and looked out at the quiet street. "Amelia has filed for divorce. The marriage is over. She is a strong woman, but she is heartbroken. He broke her trust, and that is something I can never forgive." He turned back to me, and for the first time, I saw not a district attorney, but a father, his eyes filled with a deep, cold anger for the man who had hurt his only child. "Marcus made 2 catastrophic mistakes," Robert Thorne said. "The first was thinking he could build a life on stolen money and deceit. The second, and far greater, was underestimating you." He reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a long, crisp business envelope. He laid it on the coffee table between us. It was thick. "I am not here today as the district attorney," he said. "Criminal charges would be a messy public affair that would only cause my daughter more pain. It would also drag your sister into the proceedings, which, from what I gather, might not be in your best interest either. I am here as a private citizen, seeking to rectify a situation, to clean up a mess my family is now, regrettably, a part of." He gestured to the envelope. "In here, you will find a cashier's check for $250,000. That covers the principal debt he created, plus a modest amount for interest and damages. The debt against this house has been paid in full as of this morning. Your mother's home is clear." I stared at the envelope, speechless. "You will also find a contract," he continued. "It is a non-disclosure agreement. It stipulates that you will not pursue any further legal action, criminal or civil, against Marcus Thorne, and you will not speak of this matter publicly. It is, in effect, a settlement, a permanent end to this affair." He looked at me, his gaze intense. "I am offering you a choice, Ms. Jensen. You can have justice in the form of this settlement, which will make you and your family whole again financially, or you can have vengeance and pursue a public trial. But I will tell you now, if you choose the latter, I will not be your ally. I will be a father protecting his family from public humiliation, and I will use every resource at my disposal to discredit you. So I ask you to think carefully. What is it that you truly want?" It was a threat, veiled in the language of a reasonable offer. But he was right. What did I want? Did I want to see Marcus's face plastered across the news? Did I want to drag Clara's name and my own through the mud for months, maybe years, in a draining legal battle with no certain outcome? Or did I just want it to be over? Did I want the peace that my mother had been denied? I want it to be over, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I had fought my battles. I had won. This was the peace treaty. He nodded, a flicker of what might have been respect in his eyes. A wise decision. He picked up the envelope and held it out to me. Sign the agreement, have your lawyer review it if you wish, and mail it back. The check is yours to cash immediately, regardless. I took the envelope. It felt impossibly heavy. He turned and walked to the door. With his hand on the knob, he paused. "One more thing," he said, without looking at me. "My investigators also uncovered the repayment agreement you have with your sister, the monthly checks she has been sending you." He finally turned his head, his blue eyes meeting mine. "That debt is now satisfied. Tell her to stop the payments. Consider it a further reparation from my family to yours." And with that, he was gone. The black car pulled away from the curb and the street was quiet again. I sank into my mother's armchair, the envelope in my lap. It was done. Truly, finally done. I opened it and found the check, the amount even larger than he'd said, and underneath the contract. But there was something else, too, a small handwritten note on thick cream-colored stationery. It wasn't from the lawyer, it was from Amelia. "Ms. Jensen," it read, "there are no words to express how sorry I am for what my husband did to you and your family. Thank you for telling me the truth. You did a brave and terrifying thing, and because of it, I am now free from a lie. I wish you nothing but peace. Sincerely, Amelia Thorne." Tears welled in my eyes as I read her words. It wasn't the money or the clean title to the house or even the satisfaction of Marcus's downfall. It was this small act of grace from another woman caught in the blast radius of his greed. This was the closure I never knew I needed. That evening, for the first time in a long time, I called my sister. She answered on the second ring, her voice tired and wary. "Sarah?" "It's over, Clara," I said. No anger left in my voice, only a profound weariness. "The debt on the house is paid. You don't have to send me any more checks. You're free." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sounds of a busy restaurant, the clatter of plates. She was at her second job. Finally, she spoke, her voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite place. "How?" "It doesn't matter how," I said. "It's just done. It's all done." "Oh," was all she said. Then after another long pause, she whispered, "Thank you." It wasn't an apology, not for everything she had done, but it was a start. It was the first honest word that had passed between us in years. "Goodbye, Clara," I said, and I hung up the phone. I walked through my quiet house, my mother's house, now truly mine. I thought about the choice she had given me. It hadn't just been about the house. It had been a choice to fight for myself, to find my own strength, to demand my own worth. I had stepped out from the shadow of my golden child sister and the long illness of my mother, and I had become my own person. The battle was over, and the silence that filled the house no longer felt like emptiness. It felt like peace. It felt like a new beginning. My new beginning.